The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That is the very first line in the book of the Gospel of Mark. And that's his entire point for the whole thing. The whole reason he wrote that is to, in a sense, prove to you that this man is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And it only takes us 4 chapters until we get to today's gospel, when the most important question, I think, is asked. Who then is this whom even the wind and the sea obey? And you know, the conclusion that anyone in the first century who read and who believed this miracle would have drawn is inescapable. This man, he must be God. It couldn't have simply been another God. Every religion besides Judaism and Christianity knew of lots of gods. Lots of different gods existed for them. But this gospel is claiming something of unique importance, and no one, Jew or Gentile, would have missed it. And the reason why is the imagery that's used in the gospel. It would have spoken to every faith tradition at the time. And so we might need to ask ourselves, what did they see in this miracle that maybe we missed, that maybe we failed to see? In order to see it, we have to look through the eyes of antiquity. The Jewish faith was in constant dialogue with the faiths of all of the other Near East religions at the time. The Near Eastern countries, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece. The myths and the legends that they had influenced each other over the course of history. And much of the Old Testament, believe it or not, is in a sense a corrective and a response to all of those other faiths. For example, every single Semitic religion was what we would call a nature religion. Their deities, their gods, were identified with the forces of nature. And what they did is then they personified these forces. They believed that some powerful personal entity lay behind each of them. And so that, in a nutshell, is how you get polytheism. Different forces of nature, different gods must be controlling them. And all of them had certain images that represented their power, what we would call today idols. But what they really worshiped was the personal entity, that personal reality that lay behind the representation that was the idol, not the idol itself. So the ancients, we could say, weren't kind of stupid pagans who worshiped a physical bull or a goat or a statue, right? But more importantly for them, these forces of nature, these gods that they worship, they could only be combated by other gods who had similar powers. And there was no greater god in antiquity for these Near Eastern religions than what could be called chaos. And chaos almost universally was represented by the power over the sea. This deity, it went by different names in all of those different religions, but it's found in every single one of them, and it's found particularly in all of their creation stories. It's found even in the Greek and the Roman creation stories. And each of them begin basically the same way. A god or gods begin a battle with chaos, and they manage to at least temporarily restrain it, and from that restraining, they form what we know as the universe. And then chaos would always return. It was cyclical, like the changing of the seasons. And one of the most important creation stories, mostly because of their proximity to Israel, was the Babylonians. The way that their story goes, the hero, their god, was named Marduk. And Marduk enters into battle with Tiamat, who is chaos. And she's represented as a monstrous dragon and the sea is her domain. And so they fight. And Marduk becomes victorious in battle, and he splits the dragon into two pieces. With one half, he creates an arch, which is what we call the sky. And the sky holds back the waters of chaos from above. And then the other half becomes the dry land. And then Marduk creates human beings. It's an interesting story. While every Semitic religion contained something of this type of mythos, Judaism departs from that general narrative. It dialogues with it, but it corrects it as well. And believe it or not, chaos makes its appearance in just the second verse of the Bible. It begins, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And then verse 2 says, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the waters." Chaos. "And the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters." And then God did something interesting. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. You know, people get this wrong all of the time. Genesis is not simply a scientific accounting of creation. It's not a historical play-by-play. It's a creation story written to correct the neighboring religions of the day. Unlike the Babylonians, God of Israel does not engage in combat with chaos. It is not a contest of wills. It's not even a competition. The God of Israel speaks a word, and chaos conforms to his will. The chaos out of which God creates is non-existence. It's nothing. However, nothing to an ancient people is too abstract. They can't comprehend what nothing is, right? And so it's symbolically represented in Genesis and in over a dozen psalms, including the psalm we read today. It's imaged as primordial, chaotic waters. And chaos is personified typically by a dragon or a sea monster. Just like in the Babylonian story. You've heard the words Leviathan or Rahab in the Bible. That's where it comes from. Our first reading today uses the same allusion, and we probably missed it. It says, "Who shut the doors of the sea when it burst forth from the womb? It was I who set limits for it. And it was I who" what? "I who said, 'Thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stilled.'" It's a beautiful poetic imagining of creation, but it's more than that. It's a declaration that Israel's God is the only one who has ultimate power and authority over chaos. And so, what does all of that mean for today's gospel? A man was awakened in the midst of a great storm. This man stood up, and in his own name, by his own authority, he didn't pray to anyone else. He simply stood up and spoke the words, "Quiet, be still." This man commanded chaos, and chaos obeyed. He showed complete and absolute dominion over the single greatest force of nature that anyone knew. When the question is asked, "Who then is this whom even the wind and the sea obey?" it's not really a question. It's rhetorical. This man must be God. He can be no one else, because only God commands chaos, and chaos obeys him. There's a reason why the very last book of the Bible, Revelation, revisits the same imagery. And again, just like Genesis, so many people get it wrong. So many people misread it. Everyone's trying to get out their calculators to try to figure out what day the end of the world's going to be. We're going to time somehow together the rapture or whatever other nonsense is out there. That's not the point of the book. We're missing it entirely. Revelation is the Lord's final conquest over chaos. In the final battle, we find a great dragon. Sound familiar? And where does that dragon come from? He comes out of the sea. Chaos returns once again, personified this time by Satan, to threaten the people of God. And interestingly, the Lord is portrayed as showing up, and from his mouth comes a great sword. Because for the Lord, his weapon is his word that commands all things. And he's victorious. And when the new heavens and the new earth come down, there's a very interesting line. The very next line says, "And the sea was no more." Why? Because the sea represented chaos, and chaos has been definitively defeated. It's no longer a threat, and so it no longer makes an appearance in the new heavens and a new earth. And the beast of chaos, Satan, is thrown into a lake of fire. That represents eternal chaos, everlasting chaos. So who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey? God. However, the more pressing question for us today, one that isn't rhetorical, is the question that our Lord asked of the disciples. Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith? All of us have concerns. All of us have worries, doubts, struggles in life. No one walks this earth without them. But we have to remember whom we worship. We worship a God who isn't in competition with primordial powers of chaos. He doesn't combat it. It's not a contest. And if the Lord can bring the entire universe out of nothing but his word, then can he not solve all of our problems and difficulties and struggles? Especially if you're not simply a creature, but a son or daughter of the Lord. That's why later in Mark, our Lord says, stop worrying about your life. Stop worrying about what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink, about what you're going to wear or what you're going to do. Because aren't all of you more important than those birds of the sky or the lilies of the field, whom the Lord gives their food in due season? Are you not more important as a son or daughter of the Lord than all of those things? Do we not yet have faith? That's a question each of us has to take and ponder this week. Do we have faith to trust this man who is God? Or are we maybe still cowering in the boat a little bit and afraid?